my goodness! Holy sh!
Hello friends, welcome back to this week's episode. It's going to be a little different. Occasionally in the comments for some of my other videos, someone would spot my Sport Trac here in the background and want to know more about it. And so for two reasons, I'm going to cover it this week. Number one, I didn't have anything else to put out. And number two, recently one of our normal daily drivers kind of went down. Going to need some work that I'm not going to be able to get to real soon. So this got pressed back into duty. I totally said duty. Anyway, let's take a look. It is a 2001 Explorer Sport Trac, and I have put a V8 5-liter fuel injected from a 96 into it and done a solid axle swap. Gonna fire it up, take it on down to the driveway. I need to check the air in the tires, and anyway, and then we'll start covering some of the details. First off, I'm going to apologize because I'm sure I'm going to be all over the place with my explanation for this, but let's get into it anyway. So, as I already said, this was a 2001. Before I ever got this, I'd have been wanting one of these for quite a while. I really liked them, but they were out of my price range, you know. But before I ever had it, I got a 96 Ford Explorer with the 5-liter V8 on a trade, a rolled one. So it was just sitting here doing nothing. And then this kind of fell on my lap with a bad engine. Not surprisingly, these have that V6 engine with the 3 timing chains in it, which are a horrible design. Thank you very much for that, Ford. But anyway, once I got this, I had been aware of, there was a guy in Tennessee. This was when I did this, was way back in the days when internet forums were, you know, red hot popular. And there was this guy in Tennessee that had done this. Pulled the V8 out of an Explorer and put in these. He'd done several of them, as a matter of fact. But he was telling that this was the perfect combination, what I just happened to accidentally have, a 2001 Sport Trac and a 96 Explorer. So it seemed like the obvious solution. I knew I wanted to put a lift on it, some bigger tires, and I kind of looked into what was available for what was there for the factory suspension, and I didn't like them. And so I figured if I'm going to do a solid axle swap on this, I just will do it while the engine's out. Because obviously these had an independent front suspension in them, and there was all sorts of brackets in there that had to be cut off, and there was pretty much a cross member that ran all the way underneath the engine. So it'd be nice to have that engine out of the way to do that. So that was the plan. And actually I did have this basically tore down to a bare frame. Had the body completely off of it. I think the only thing that was left in it still was the original rear axle at that point. And I torched all the stuff off the front, and then I welded in. Let's see here if I can get a good shot of it. I welded in this piece of pipe that runs all the way across the frame rails and through both sides of the frame rails for maximum rigidity to try to make up for having that original cross member missing. Now then, let's see. Originally, I was going to use early Bronco axles underneath it, but the early Bronco axle pushed the pumpkin over too much towards the center, and it was uncomfortably close to the oil pan. So I ended up going with the full-size Ford half-ton axle. Now, this particular one is from a 75, and a 75 has drum brakes out here. To get the disc brakes on it, I use GM spindles. This is a common thing for early Broncos that have drum brakes. Use a GM Dana 44 spindle from a half-ton, which they were only used up until, I don't know, the mid-70s. They're getting hard to find, but a friend had a pair, But that particular spindle is the whole key to making this happen. You use the GM spindle, and then that allows you to use the GM backing plate, as you can see there, and a GM caliper. But you use the Ford half-ton hub and rotor, disc brake hub and rotor. And like I said, for some reason it does not work with the 3/4 ton Dana 44 Chevy axle or the 10 bolt. So anyway, we're going to delve into a little bit here as a side thing about why I used this 75 axle instead of just using one that already had disc brakes. Gonna head on up here in the field, so I got some visual references to show you for this little bit of educational crap. So aside from learning something about my Sport Trac, we're going to learn something about 70s Ford half-ton front axles here. These axles, this one, and the one that's still in the frame here, are, well, these would be pre-78 ones. And this is how you tell them apart. On all these wedges that you go in the radius arms, they are removable. You can clearly see that you can grind the welds and take them off of the tubes. But this axle in the back of this truck is a 78 or 79. Well, it's going to be kind of hard to tell, but it has this whole outer end on the end of the tube is made as one piece. So those radius arm wedges are not removable on either side. Let me get in there and show you. Wish the radius arms weren't on it. You could really see it a lot better. So there's nothing actually wrong with these 78 and 79 front axles if you're going to use the radius arms and want to use them the way they are in the location that they are. Now the reason that these ones are more desirable is if you're doing custom stuff. Like if you want to take the wedges off completely and use leaf springs. Although I don't know why you'd want to go to that kind of archaic technique. But anyway, yeah, if you want to take them off and do link mounts, or like I did with my Sport Trac, I basically took these off and moved them inward a little bit to get my radius arms and coil springs to line up with the frame rail. I'm also saving one of these because I got a 56 F100 down there. I'm going to be doing the same thing with that. Scooting the radius arm mounts in just to get the coil springs to line up properly with the frame. Now that we've gotten past that, I can't tell you the exact amount that I did move the wedges in. I don't remember. It's been so long ago that I built this. One of the other things I did was I actually tilted the wedges to where I wanted them, so I didn't have to use aftermarket bushings in the wedges to adjust my caster. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I even, maybe not, it seems like I remember that I probably even cut these off and re-angled them. So I wanted to get everything right. To get everything to optimally where I wanted it, I re-tipped the wedges, re-tipped that, and that got my pinion to where I wanted it as well. So that axle is just, that's the cat's meow for if you want to adjust all that or do custom links or leaf springs. But anyway, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get back to the rest of the vehicle. Now, as you can see here, obviously I kept the radius arm set up. But what I did do is I lengthened them by kind of fish mouthing one of them open and sliding the other one onto it and then welding it all together. And then there's a plate on each side to strengthen it. Kind of hard to tell with as muddy as it is. The actual radius arm mounts came from like a Ford van. There. I had to box the inside of the frame. It gives that van mount something else to be welded to. I couldn't box this side because I had to have access to the fuel lines and whatnot, so I had to just trim the van mount down and weld it to the frame right there. Doesn't seem to be a problem. Front axle is geared 410s. It's open. No limited slip or locker in it yet. Let's see, moving on to the rear, you might be surprised to see that it does not have a 9-inch. This is an 8.8 from I think about a 93 F-150. And the reason I went with it was to get a little better pinion angle. At the time when I was building it, I thought that would be a good idea, and normally it would be, but I don't think it's really an issue with this. It ended up having a lot longer drive shaft than I thought it would. I probably should have and could have went with the 9-inch, and it could still end up in there someday. Also geared 410s, and I did put a Ford limited slip in it with the Kevlar clutches. And honestly, I do like those limited slips, but in a truck, they just don't last. They're fine for car duty, but yeah, in a truck, big old tires like this just totally overload them. Now, I don't know how much lift this has. Basically, what I did, once I had the engine in, I didn't have the front suspension done yet, but once I had the engine in and the body back on it, I went ahead and I pulled the original Explorer axle out, and I put the Ford half-ton axle in it, but I put the axle in underneath the leaf springs instead of on top. And then I built the front suspension to match. If I had to guess, I would say that's probably 6 inches of lift over original. Tires are 33 1250 by 15s. You might have noticed I had taken these off last summer and put them on the 76 Bronco project, but seeing as how this thing needs to be driven now, they're back on this. There's the 5-liter /302 from the 96. This thing is damn near a bolt-in conversion. The computer didn't have to be reflashed or anything. I did have to use the 96 computer up there. The wiring harness from the engine. There's only one thing that as I recall, like I said, I did this a long time ago. There's probably things I'm forgetting. But the only one thing I had to do was the temperature sensor down there. I had to, what was it, either I had to add a ground or something. You can see there's something funny going on there. Feels stupid, been so long ago, I don't remember what all I did. I used the Explorer transmission, which is a 4R70W. Now the V8 Explorers use an all-time four-wheel drive transfer case. There's no low range, there's just high range and four-wheel drive all the time. I didn't want that, so I used what is this? I forget what it was. It came out of a 2002 Expedition anyway, and it bolted right on. Same spline, same bolt pattern, and electric shift, which worked perfectly with the Sport Trac wiring. The only difference here is these are the command track wiring that were in the Expedition. Dual exhaust, running into a MagnaFlow, dual in, dual out, and it crosses over inside. Has a pretty good sound, if I do say so myself. My custom cross member I had to make. I used the original cross member and then had to actually modify this to fit up and over the drive shaft. Okay, the coil springs are just a factory late 70s coil spring of some sort. Actually, they might even be an aftermarket lift kit coil. I don't know, they're just kind of what I had in my inventory. Shocks are Rancho RS 9000s, I believe. They've got the adjustable damping knob on them, although I've never messed with them. Obviously made all my brackets and buckets and whatnot and everything. Now for the steering, this Sport Trac originally had rack and pinion, so obviously I had to put a steering box on this. The only two things I could find that might fit, a Toyota box would almost fit in there, but it would actually hit the radiator support. This particular box is from a 70s two-wheel drive Ford truck, and it does look odd the way it's mounted. But the great thing about these boxes, there is a huge amount of drop right in here. So if you're building something that's lifted, these are a really good candidate. So that's kind of why I went with that. But unfortunately, in their stock location on a two-wheel drive truck, they're mounted on the inside of the frame. Well, there was no room to do that in there. So obviously I had to build this mounting box, slip it down in there. There is an additional support. I don't know if I can get it here. There's an additional support right there that bolts right onto the steering box and runs over to the opposite frame rail. Now all this right here is just to protect the radiator. I used the V8 radiator from out of the 96. And yeah, that's just pipe that's been welded up there to protect it. I never did decide what I wanted to do for a front bumper, so it just doesn't have one yet. All my steering links have Heim joints on them. The tie rod, the drag link, and it has a hydraulic assist. That cylinder is right there, and it taps right into the steering box. Where is the other one? Clear right there, clear up to the front. The pump, the power steering pump right here, I sent it into, what was it, Lee Power Steering out in California to have it worked over to give more flow. It's fine going down the road. It could still use more flow. About the only place it's really a problem is when you're in a parking lot and you're at idle and you're, moving around a lot with a lot of steering input. It won't quite keep up. Damn it! Yeah, it can still be done with one finger, but it takes a little bit of effort, and you have to give it a little bit of time for the pump to catch up. Otherwise, it does just fine. Anytime you're above idle, there's enough flow to do whatever I want. Now this plug here, that was the original anti-lock brake bullshit. It is obviously gone now. And the battery was mounted in here, but because of the steering box situation, the battery is now mounted in the bed. Interior stock, nothing going on in there. And I did have to do something with the fuel lines. I don't remember if I used the V8 Explorer gas tank. I don't think I did. I think I think both the Explorer and this had return type fuel systems on it, but I did have to extend the lines. I think I used the lines from the Explorer on this, but they had to be extended because this has a longer wheelbase. The return line was no big deal. Rubber fuel hose, couple of hose clamps, but the pressure line, I had to have that made, if I remember right. Well, I know I had to have it made, but I don't remember the particulars about which gas tank I used, but whatever. There was a difference in wheelbase. Now, back when I was driving this a lot on the road, I got a lot of compliments everywhere I went, because you just don't see Sport Tracs lifted like this with V8s in them. But I guess if I was going to say there were any downfalls to this that I don't like about it, the way those tires stick out, it looks cool, no doubt about that, but I live on gravel, a lot of gravel, so when the roads are sloppy like they are today, it just throws crap all over the windshield and the side windows. So yeah, you better have good wipers on it and keep that reservoir full of wiper fluid. I did keep the AC on it, but I never have charged it or used it. I don't know, it might just be a better idea just to get rid of all that and put a Saginaw pump in there and just forget about the air conditioning. I seem to be getting by without it. But, the last, I don't know, 4 years or so, this just sits around the yard. I fire it up every few months just to move it around and mow around it, or sometimes I'll use it to go pull something or run a little errand with it around the property. But she's being driven again now for who knows how long. And those of you that know, these 5-liter V8 Explorer engines have just some of the most convoluted, nasty ass exhaust manifolds. These ones are Hedman headers, shorty headers for a, I don't know the part number, but they are for like a really early Falcon or Mustang V8. These are a really popular header to use for doing V8 swaps in Rangers that are older than this, that have the twin I-beam suspensions. I'm pretty sure these would not work here, because not so much this side as I recall, but the passenger side, all the brackets here that were for the independent front suspension, would have got into that header if I remember right. But they work pretty good in this, yeah, for doing the solid axle swap. Now these coil spring buckets, these are homemade, obviously, as you can tell. I just cut the top out of a Ford coil spring bucket. They just would not work in its configuration for the amount of lift that I wanted. So I just used the top out of it and built the sides. The shock mounts, those are from like 80s or 90s F250. I don't think I did anything for custom mounts back here. Did actually manage to squeeze a full-size 33-inch spare back there. This is kind of odd. One of the local grocery stores here in town has a nice little mud bog set up right behind the store, but I've never seen anybody use it. Maybe one of these days I'll get brave enough to give it a try. Hum of the tires on the pavement. There's a place up here I've been eyeballing a couple of vehicles. They're kind of an antique store. I'm sure the vehicles were never intended to be drivable or functional. I think they were just put together as yard art, but I kind of wanted to check them out. Maybe today's the day. Good a day as any. Short bed Ford up there. There's one of them, and there's the other. Maybe it was meant to be a functional vehicle at one time. I drive by and I picture this in my mind with four-wheel drive chassis underneath it, sitting on about, I don't know, 35 or 38-inch mud tires. Fab wide 5 wheels in there. Yeah, I just assumed it was a bunch of crap thrown together just to look like an old race car, but I think it actually was an old race car. Let's go check out the other one. Toyota rear end, maybe? Let's go check out the short bed Ford. I could still picture one of these sitting on a four-wheel drive chassis with big old mud tires on them. Well, I'll be damned, it's actually four-wheel drive. I always assumed it was two-wheel drive from the road. Four-speed, excellent. Some sort of an FE variant, probably a 360. So I talked to the owner, and yeah, as you can see, those were actually vintage race cars. He picked them up from, what did he say, Mason City, somewhere up in northern Iowa. And I asked him if they were for sale, and he kind of hum-hawed around, so he never did say one way or the other. So I'm going to take that as a no. They are not for sale. I suppose if you really offered him a lot, he probably would. What the hell? It ain't my dog. These tires, they don't make this particular tread pattern anymore, but these tires are actually pretty damn good in mud, but they suck ass in snow. Try not to get mud thrown all over my phone. Well, I don't know why my camera shut off, but it did. So it didn't catch me getting up to this point. But this is pretty much all I'm going to get out of it. I've been wheeling long enough to know that I am stuck there. I can move back till I reach the tree, but I cannot get the front end to pop out and go this way or that way. So I need to get other vehicular help. Just gonna run the winch cable over there, try to put a little side pressure on it. I got it in neutral right now. I'll try just pulling on it, see if I can't get the front end pulled up a little bit, get over all those wet, greasy logs right there. Or just take the logs with it. That's how it's done, bitches. Well, sorry about that. I don't know why the camera phone shut off. Maybe I accidentally had some setting going that where it shuts it off after a certain amount of time. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, there it is. Look at my Sport Trac, lifted in V8, solid axle. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, well, that's too bad. You didn't have to watch. Got any questions about it? Just ask me in the comments, and you know the rest of the spiel. Go out there and find yourself a project. Have fun with it, douchebag.